About Native Son, created by Richard Wright. Right from the start, we are introduced to Bigger Thomas, who will be our main character throughout the book and has been headed for jail. Um, could have been for an assault. By chance, it was for murder and rape. Native Son tells us the story of this young black man caught in a downward spiral after he kills a young white woman in a brief moment of panic. Set in Chicago in the 1930s, Wright, the author of the book, writes us a powerful novel and an unsparing reflection on the poverty and feeling of hopelessness experienced by people in inner cities across the country and of what it means to be black in America. So, first, let's talk about the book. How did you feel about reading it?
I personally enjoyed the book. It took me a while to get used to bigger situations of story, but after a couple chapters, I was into it, and it was actually turned out to be very interesting.
My experience with the book was a rather interesting one. I'm not used to necessarily reading books about discrimination or like political distribution, but it felt nice getting out of my comfort zone.
For me, the introduction was really boring, but then the first chapter was really good and interesting.
So, for me, well, the book was overall very interesting, and being able to read about something that you don't usually see happening in real life or being talked about in real life was pretty interesting, and I felt like it was something that I could have connected to, especially now that Donald Trump has increased racism in a type of way with his comments of illegal immigrants. So, that leads us to our next question. Without spoiling the ending, what was your favorite part and how were you able to connect to the book?
One of my favorite parts would have to be the beginning, and I know it's like a small scene, but it's with the rat. So in the beginning, Bigger's mom and wakes everyone up because she spots a rat on the floor, and everyone's panicking. And Bigger and his brother try to kill the rat, and I know it seems like small, but to me, I interpret it as they show what part they play in the family. So Bigger, he plays the role of the leader, but the one who also takes care of many other people. That scene is like he's trying to protect them from the rat, which is in the big thing, but he was still willing to go. And I can connect to it because in my family, I am the oldest sibling, so I have to take care of all my siblings as well. And I feel like I would have done the same. If there was a rat in my house, I would have tried to get it away from my family, like try to kill it so my family won't be scared.
Well, for me, I'm gonna be honest with you. My favorite part was when Bigger was talking to his lawyer. Like, I found that the most interesting part, as as to why, is because like at that moment you actually get to see Bigger himself up more. Like he's actually sharing his thoughts and his feelings, which is something he hasn't done throughout the entire book. Like he actually contains it with himself, and it isn't until this point where he actually talks like he's sharing his opinions and like his motives and why he has done these acts. So like I found that part very uplifting.
I'll agree with Saul because I feel like I will see my family reacting to it, like seeing the rat and trying to kill it, and yeah.
So I would also have to agree with Sawa because I mean it was overall a funny part, but I mean I could have personally connected to it because in my house my mom usually acts the same as my family, so we all have to like work together and try to kill the rat. So I mean that was a part that like to me it was like something I could have connected to. So what's the controversy behind this book? Why do you guys think this book was banned? Do you guys agree with it or do you guys disagree with it?
So first of all, this book was banned 8 times. I don't know how 8 times, but it just happened, and it was banned by many states, including Michigan, Indiana, and North Carolina. It was banned because of the racism and the language and sexual content. But I personally don't agree with this. I mean, keep in mind the people who are reading these books should be mature people, like my age or high schoolers in general. I mean, and at that time we understand all this stuff, and I think we're mature enough to be able to read a book based on these certain topics and be actually interested in them and see deeper into the story.
I don't agree with banning the book because there was a purpose for the book to be banned. But I feel like he wanted to tell what was happening, and he probably felt the need to tell us how they were treated.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the case nowadays. Like, you have this certain part of history where it's just like, if the people kind of in charge of how the public necessarily should like learn about their history, they just find it unnecessary and irrelevant to their time. But in reality, it's our history, and it gives us a better idea on necessarily on how like the world came to be and the situations that we deal with now.
So I agree with all of you, and like you said, it was banned because of sexual contact. But personally, like I also disagree with it because I mean it's something that like it shouldn't be brand new to us, especially high schoolers. Because I mean, like how this world is like changing a lot, and the people are changing as well. Like many people are learning stuff that they shouldn't be learning now. And so I really like it shouldn't be banned because it's not something new to us. Like it's been there and it's personally not something new. So this leads us to our final question. Like what can we learn from this book and why is it important for high schoolers to have it in general, like have it in libraries or something?
This book goes more in depth than textbooks. I mean, what I mean by that is like many textbooks, it's all black and white. Like during this time, especially since this was written right before the civil rights movement, it shows that like the people were just finally going to their breaking point and like saying we've had enough. And then in the textbooks, it just says like they were treated bad, the whites had more advantage. But this one shows like a more specific case of what was actually going on in that time, and it gives us a clear interpretation of how people were being treated during that time.
Yeah, and I would have to agree to that because like I feel like the book and the material like it presents is well appropriate for high schoolers since like the gives gives us a better idea on what exactly was going on at that time and how a colored skin like lived out his days and the consequences that he feared to be like prosecuted about.
And how they were treated differently. Yeah.
Okay, I also agree with them because they're trying to show an importance of what they were going through. So it also impacted their lives, like the way they experience everything.
So yeah, I personally agree with all of you, but I mean it could also benefit us as high schoolers because it could give us a taste of the world that like we haven't really touched on or experienced, especially since this book is from the 1930s. Like it gives us history of what was happening in the 1930s and how the world was and how people were treated, and like it gives us like connections with this world in the 1930s.
Overall, this was a really good book, and I recommend people read it. I mean, like Ricardo said, people might go out of their comfort zone, but it's actually worth it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
bye.